Richard Langston doesn't laugh when the black delivery boy reaches his gate. He laughs when he hears what's in the boy's hand. Legal papers? Then he looks at the kid's shoes. Wet. Scuffed. Cheap enough for a man like Richard to think he already knows the ending. And right there, in front of a driveway full of imported cars, crystal glasses, and people dressed like money has never once said no to them, he decides to make a show of it. He lifts the envelope between two fingers, laughs loud. Mean. The kind of laugh that invites a crowd. The kind that tells everyone else exactly who they're allowed to laugh at, too. A few guests turn. Then more. One man grins before he even knows why. A woman near the fountain whispers, "Oh, this should be good." And the boy at the gate, 19 years old, shoulders damp from the rain, delivery bag still strapped across his chest, doesn't flinch. He just holds the envelope steady, looks Richard in the eye, and says, calm enough to cut through the noise, "Read the name, sir." That line lands harder than it should. Because if Richard is not served before 9 tonight, 312 families are about to lose the only homes they can still afford. If he is not served before 9, a redevelopment deal closes at midnight and wipes out a housing covenant his father was never supposed to touch. If he is not served before 9, a woman who spent 22 years swallowing her own last name is about to watch the man who stole her family's legacy turn it into luxury glass and valet parking. And the boy holding that envelope? He is not just a delivery boy. Tonight, he is the last thing standing between Richard Langston and a lie that has lasted half a lifetime. His name is Elijah Bennett, and 6 hours earlier, he is standing in a cramped office above a tire shop staring at a manila envelope like it weighs more than paper should. Rushline Legal Courier is all fluorescent lights, old coffee, and people who don't get paid enough to care but somehow still do. Most nights, Elijah grabs a route, straps on his body cam, and spends 8 hours weaving through traffic on an e-bike, dropping subpoenas, filings, notices, things people never want to receive, and almost never thank him for bringing. It's work. Nothing more. Until Mr. Vega calls him into the back office. Vega doesn't sit, doesn't waste time, just slides a delivery brief across the desk and taps the deadline with one finger. Recipient only, he says. No assistant, no house manager, no security guy, Richard Langston himself. Elijah reads the sheet once. Then again. High priority emergency service. Property injunction. Trust dispute. Corporate freeze request. Recipient, Richard Edward Langston. Location, Langston Estate, Brookmere Heights. Event in progress, private donor gala. Deadline, 8:45 p.m. Then his eyes catch the name again. Langston. Something inside him tightens. Vega sees it. You know this case? Elijah looks up. My mother does. That changes the room. Just slightly. Enough to matter. Vega leans back. She involved? Elijah nods once. Vega studies him. Then I can reassign it. That should make the decision easy. It doesn't. Because part of Elijah wants exactly that. Wants this envelope out of his hands and off his chest and far away from anything with the name Langston on it. But another part of him sees the past due notice on the kitchen counter. His mother rubbing her fingers when the pain gets bad. The look on her face this morning when she said one sentence she had clearly been holding in for years. If it reaches him, make him read the name. Elijah looks at Vega. I'll do it. Vega holds his stare. You sure? Yes, sir. Vega slides over the actual envelope. It's thick. Sealed. Heavy with copies. Petition, exhibits, hearing notice, affidavits. In the upper corner, the return line reads, Asha Cole, attorney at law. On behalf of Naomi Camille Langston Bennett. Elijah doesn't move for a second. Naomi. His mother. Camille. His grandmother. Langston. The name people in their apartment have always said like it belonged to somebody else. Vega clears his throat. Body cam stays on. He refuses. You state the time. Identify him. Leave the papers in his presence. Don't argue. Don't posture. Just complete the service. Elijah nods. But as he takes the envelope, he already knows tonight won't stay that clean. By the time he gets home to change his hoodie, his mother is at the kitchen table with both hands around a mug of tea she hasn't touched. Their apartment is small enough that silence fills it fast. The heater knocks. A TV leaks through the wall from the neighbor's place. Somebody downstairs is yelling about a parking spot. Naomi Bennett sits very still, 42 years old. Face tired, not weak. The kind of woman life keeps trying to bend because it can't quite break her. Elijah drops his bag on the counter. I'm taking the run. Naomi looks up. You don't have to. Vega said the same thing. And I said yes. She takes that in. Not proud. Not afraid. Something quieter than both. If he mocks you, she says, let him. Elijah leans against the sink. That's your pep talk? If he refuses the papers, let him. If he tries to make you feel small, let him. She lifts her eyes fully now. But if he looks at that envelope, really looks at it, make him read the name. Elijah watches her. There's no shake in her voice. That gets his attention more than fear would. He's heard pieces of the Langston story his whole life. Never all at once. Never in order. Just fragments. A house on a hill. A locked library. A grandmother named Camille. A grandfather named Edward. A son named Richard. A will that changed. Then disappeared. Then somehow never existed at all. When Elijah was younger, he thought the Langstons were just some rich white family his mother used to work around. When he got older, he understood that wasn't true. Work doesn't leave that kind of bruise. Betrayal does. Naomi reaches into the drawer beside her and takes out an old silver fountain pen. Worn smooth, near the cap. Heavy. Beautiful in a tired kind of way. She holds it out. Elijah takes it carefully. Whose? Your grandfather's. That word lands. Not as a story this time. As a fact. He signed the amendment with that pen, Naomi says. The one Richard buried. Elijah turns it over in his hand. You really think he knew about what Richard did? Naomi gives the faintest exhale. I think some people die believing truth will hold without them. She looks at the pen. Then someone greedy survives them. Elijah slips it into his bag. Naomi stands, comes over, straightens the strap on his shoulder like he's still 12. If he asks who you are, I tell him Elijah Bennett. Her hand stills. No. He looks at her. And for the first time in his life, she says it without lowering her voice. Elijah Edward Langston Bennett. The room doesn't move, but something in him does. You want me to use that name? I want you to stop hiding it for other people's comfort. He holds her stare. Because when you grow up watching a parent survive by making themselves smaller, it changes you when they finally stop. Naomi touches his cheek. Whatever happens tonight, don't let that man decide who you are. By the time Elijah reaches Brookmere Heights, the rain has thinned to a silver mist. The neighborhood looks less like a place people live and more like a place people display victory. Stone walls. Iron gates. Landscaping with lighting under the trees. At the far end of the road, the Langston estate glows like it was built to be admired from a distance. Valet line. String quartet on the lawn. Staff in black moving in clean, practiced lines. Elijah checks the address twice anyway. Some places make you do that. Not because you're lost. Because your body can tell when a place was designed to make you feel like a mistake. At the gate, security steps in front of his front tire before he fully stops. Service entrance is around back. Elijah unclips the waterproof sleeve. Legal delivery for Richard Langston. Recipient only. The guard barely glances at it. Leave it with me. Can't. Then leave. Elijah stays where he is. Sir, I need to identify him personally. The guard's face shifts into that look some men wear when they're not used to hearing no from the kind of person they've already decided doesn't matter. A second guard walks over. Then a woman with an earpiece. And because wealthy people can smell disruption through walls, a few guests near the drive begin turning toward the gate. The woman with the earpiece gives Elijah a quick look and smiles with only half her mouth. What exactly are you delivering? Legal papers for Richard Langston. She lets out a small laugh. From who? I'm authorized to disclose that to the recipient. That smile fades. Sweetheart, you are not getting anywhere near Mr. Langston. Elijah doesn't answer the sweetheart. He just taps his body cam so the red light is visible. The first guard notices. What's that for? Chain of service. That does it. Now they're all paying attention. The woman folds her arms. Tonight is private. This is legal service. This is a donor event. And this is still a civil matter. One of the guards mutters, "Who trained this kid?" Then headlights sweep the front drive. A black SUV pulls up near the steps, and just like that, the whole place shifts. Staff straighten. Valet moves faster. The woman with the earpiece touches her ear and says, "He's here." Richard Langston steps out of the SUV like he owns the air around him. 56. Tailored black suit. Silver at the temples. Expensive face. Not warm, not kind. Just polished enough that people mistake control for character. He says something to the valet, something else to the woman with the earpiece, then notices the boy at the gate. You can almost see the calculation happen. Delivery bag. Wet hoodie. Black kid. Wrong side of town written in the tires of the bike. And because men like Richard confuse quick judgment with intelligence, he decides he has the whole story in one glance. What is this? He asks. The woman answers first. He says he has legal papers for you. Richard's eyebrows lift. Then comes the laugh. Big. Sharp. Public. Legal papers? He repeats. You? A couple guests laugh too. A man on the steps actually snorts. Elijah holds out the envelope. Richard Langston? Richard looks at him like he's part of the evening's entertainment. You know who I am. I need verbal confirmation. That earns another laugh. Richard takes the envelope, but only with 2 fingers, like he doesn't want the job to rub off on him. And what exactly makes you think you get to walk up to my front gate during my event? The court. That line gets a sound out of the crowd. Not loud. Just enough. Richard half turns toward them, already performing. You hear that? The court sent me a bicycle. More laughter. A phone comes out. Someone whispers, "This is insane." And if you've ever been the wrong person in the wrong place, while strangers decide what you are before you open your mouth, you know how long a few seconds can stretch. Richard flips the envelope over without really reading it. What is this? Another tenant stunt? Another activist tantrum? Somebody mad progress costs money? Elijah says, "Read the name, sir." It's simple, not loud, but it changes the temperature. Richard looks back at him. Something in his expression hardens. Maybe because he doesn't like being instructed. Maybe because Elijah hasn't bowed yet. Maybe because rich men can smell resistance even when it's quiet. He steps closer, close enough for Elijah to catch the scent of cedar and whiskey on his jacket. You people always show up at the front when you're supposed to use the back. The laughter this time is smaller, more nervous. Because even rooms like this know when a joke stops being a joke. Elijah feels that sentence hit the way old insults do. Not because it's new, because it isn't. Because boys like him hear versions of that line in schools, stores, office lobbies, apartment showings, and half smiles their whole lives. Same message, different clothes. Know your place. He could answer a dozen different ways. Instead, he says the only thing that matters. Read the name. And for the first time, Richard actually really looks, at the upper left corner, at the line below the return address. On behalf of Naomi Camille Langston Bennett. His face changes. Not dramatically. That would almost be easier. It happens in layers. First the amusement dies. Then the color shifts. Then his fingers tighten on the envelope. The crowd doesn't understand yet, but it feels it. The room gets quieter. A woman lowers her phone. One of the guards glances between Richard and Elijah. Richard reads the name again. Naomi. Camille. Langston. And for one brief second, he looks less like the host of the night and more like a man who just heard a dead part of his life knock on the front door. Then he lifts his eyes to Elijah. Really lifts them this time. Takes in the shape of his face, the jawline, The eyes. Something there unsettles him. What did you say your name was? We're pleasing. Elijah lets the silence breathe for one beat. Then he says it exactly the way his mother told him to. Elijah Edward Langston Bennett. Now the air changes for real. Not because the crowd understands. They don't. Not yet. But Richard does. His voice drops. Who told you to use that name? My mother. Richard straightens slowly. The public mask slides back on. That smooth donor smile. That clean, careful voice men like him keep ready for cameras and damage control. Ladies and gentlemen, he says lightly, turning just enough for the guests to see his face again. It seems someone is trying to stage a little family melodrama at my front door. A few people laugh, relieved he gave them a safe way back into the moment. Richard tries to hand the envelope back. I don't accept fraudulent service. Elijah doesn't take it. You've been identified. You've been notified. Refusal doesn't stop service. That lands harder than the first line. Because it sounds official. Because it sounds true. Because procedure has a way of making wealth feel small. Richard's smile disappears. He turns to security. Remove him. A guard reaches for Elijah's arm. Elijah steps back and raises his voice just enough for the camera and the crowd. Time of attempted refusal, 8:17 p.m. Recipient verbally identified as Richard Edward Langston. Emergency petition and hearing notice served in his presence. Now people are really listening. Because the scene just changed. This is no longer a poor kid making noise at a rich man's party. This is a record. The guard grabs Elijah's elbow anyway. Hard. Richard tears the envelope open. He doesn't mean to. He just can't stop himself. And if the night had ended there, with Elijah pushed backward through a crowd that laughed at him and Richard shaken but still standing, it would have been ugly enough. But the papers are worse than Richard expected. Much worse. Page 1 is a notice of emergency hearing set for 9:30 p.m. Page 2 is a petition to freeze the South Market redevelopment transfer pending review of concealed trust interests and unlawful interference with protected housing covenants. Page 3 is the page that stops him cold. Exhibit Summary. Certified Marriage Certificate, Edward Langston and Camille Bennett Langston. Original Trust Amendment naming Naomi Camille Langston as equal beneficiary. Sworn Declaration of Leonard Pike, former counsel to Edward Langston. Property Covenant protecting South Market residential use. Handwriting analysis. Archive references. Notice of preservation request. Richard reads the list once. Then again, his jaw tightens. A woman in a gold dress near the steps says, "Richard?" He doesn't answer. A board member moves closer. "Is something wrong?" Richard snaps the file shut. Nothing is wrong, but it doesn't sound like nothing. It sounds like a man trying to close a door while the fire is already underneath it. By the gate, the guard releases Elijah with a final shove. His bike tips against the stone wall. The woman with the earpiece steps close and quietly offers him a folded $100 bill. "You should have taken the money and left." Elijah stares at the bill, then at her. There it is. The insult beneath the insult. Not just that he can be laughed at, that he can be bought off too. "I'm not here for a tip," he says. He picks up his bike. Behind him, the quartet starts playing again, soft and elegant like rich people think music can disinfect a scandal before it spreads. His phone buzzes. A text from Asha Cole. Did he read it? Elijah types back. Yes. A reply comes immediately. Then service is complete. Stay nearby. He should feel better. He doesn't. Because completion and closure are not the same thing. Inside the estate, Richard is already moving. Fast. Too fast. He pulls aside his counsel. Then 2 board members. Then the city deputy attending the gala. He tries to lower voices, redirect guests, restart the music, control the frame, control the narrative, control the room. That's what men like Richard do when panic hits. They narrate over it. But tonight the papers hit the one weak place he never expected anyone to reach. Not money. Not image. Ownership. The lie under all the polish. A woman follows him up the steps. Celeste Monroe. His fiancée, media-trained, impeccable, younger than him by enough years to make people notice and polite enough not to say it out loud. "Who is Naomi Langston?" she asks. Richard keeps walking. "Nobody." "She clearly isn't nobody." "It's opportunism." "Then why do you look like that?" He stops, turns, and for one clean second, the charm is gone. "I look," he says, "like a man being harassed on his own property." Celeste folds her arms. "And the boy? What about him?" And quote, "He used your last name." Richard answers too quickly. He was coached. They enter the library. The room Naomi used to describe in fragments. Dark wood, glass cabinets, the smell of old paper and money. Margaret Sloane is already there, waiting. 63, sharp-eyed, silver hair. The kind of woman who has spent too many years in boardrooms to be impressed by expensive anger. She extends her hand. "Let me see the filing." Richard keeps the packet at his side. "It's under control." "That's not what I asked." He hesitates. Small mistake. Important one. Authority survives a lot. Hesitation is not one of them. He finally hands her the top pages. Margaret scans the petition. Then the exhibit list. Then the Pike affidavit reference. When she looks up, her voice is quiet. Too quiet. "How long have you known about this?" Richard keeps his tone flat. "It's fabricated." "Then you won't mind full review." "It's a nuisance filing." "A nuisance filing with Leonard Pike's name on it?" That lands. Pike had been Edward Langston's attorney for decades. Careful man. Loyal man. Dead man. If his name is in this, the ground is not as solid as Richard wants it to be. Celeste takes the papers from Margaret and reads. Her eyes catch Camille's name, then Naomi's, then the phrase equal beneficiary. She lowers the packet slowly. "Is she Edward's daughter?" Richard doesn't answer. Margaret notices that too, which is when the problem becomes bigger than a party. Because a secret stays private only until the right person asks the wrong question in the right room. Outside the gate, Elijah waits in the rain. His mother texts. "Served?" He replies, "Yes." A few seconds pass. Then her answer comes. "Good. Come home." He looks back at the estate. He should. He really should. Then another car turns into the drive. A black sedan. Asha Cole steps out in a raincoat with a leather file case tucked under one arm. She spots Elijah immediately. "You okay?" He gives a tiny shrug, which is his version of no. Asha glances toward the house. He laughed? In front of half the city. Asha nods once. Then let him. He needed an audience for what comes next. She opens her file and hands him a second packet. Board notice. If Margaret Sloane comes out, she gets this. Elijah looks at it. "You knew she might?" "I hoped she would." He studies her face. "Are we actually stopping this?" Asha looks toward the house. "Tonight? Maybe. Long term? Depends on who can stand the truth longer." That's not enough for him. "Why now?" She exhales. "Because he deserves the clean version, even if the truth itself is not clean." 3 months ago, Leonard Pike died in assisted care outside Hartford. 2 weeks later, a storage company called my office. He left instructions. If he died, the contents of a sealed unit were to be released to Naomi Langston Bennett. Elijah says nothing. Asha keeps going. Inside were originals, trust amendment, marriage certificate, covenant copies, a recorded statement, notes Pike kept because guilt finally outweighed fear. Elijah's jaw tightens. So he waits till he's dead to grow a spine. Asha gives him a hard look. That's still more than most people around Richard ever did. Rain taps the stone beside them. He hid my mother on purpose. Yes, for 22 years. Yes. Elijah looks through the gate at the lit windows of the house. And now he's about to lose everything over paper? Asha shakes her head. Not paper, timing. He looks at her. South Market closes at midnight. Once the transfer goes through, Families start getting pushed out under redevelopment compliance language. Your mother didn't file to embarrass him. She filed to stop the clock. That line hits. Because now the night is not just about family. It's about doors closing on people who will never even know his mother's name. Asha glances at his body cam. You got the humiliation on video? Yes. The threats? What threats? Before she can answer, his phone buzzes again. Unknown number. Leave now. This won't end well for your mother. Then, another. People like you should learn when to stop. Elijah stares at the screen. Shows Asha. Her face hardens instantly. Good, she says. He looks up. Good? Not for you. For court. That's when the front doors open again. Margaret Sloane steps onto the landing, spots Elijah, and walks straight toward him. He hands her the board notice. She reads the cover sheet under the portico light. Emergency beneficiary action. Board appearance requested. Preservation demand. Did he touch the papers? She asks. Yes, ma'am. Did he identify himself? Yes. Did he humiliate you on camera? Asha answers before Elijah does. Yes. Margaret gives a short nod. Good. Then she looks at Elijah more closely. Really? Looks? You have Camille's face. He blinks. Not because he knows whether it's true. Because it's the first time anyone outside his mother has said his grandmother's name like it belongs in daylight. Margaret heads back inside. And now, the night starts moving faster than Richard can control. By 8:49, 3 more board members have been pulled into the library. By 8:56, the deputy city council is making calls from a side hall. By 9:03, Celeste has stopped standing beside Richard and started standing half a step away from him. By 9:07, somebody leaks a photo of the filing header. By 9:11, a local reporter posts, Emergency trust challenge may freeze Langston South Market deal. By 9:14, tenants in South Market start hearing whispers in group chats. By 9:18, Richard's phone is vibrating faster than he can answer. And by 9:20, he makes the mistake powerful men make when their stories start slipping away from them. He tries to fix it personally. He comes back outside. Alone. No smile. No crowd voice. Just anger in an expensive suit. Elijah sees him first. Asha steps forward, too. Richard lifts a hand. This is between me and the boy. Asha doesn't move. No, it isn't. He looks at her like he's tasted something bitter. Counselor. Then back at Elijah. Walk with me. Elijah stays still. Asha says, absolutely not. Richard's jaw tightens. I'm trying to resolve this quietly. Asha lets out a short laugh. You had your chance to be quiet before you turned him into a joke at your gate. Richard ignores her. He keeps his eyes on Elijah. My father was a sentimental man near the end of his life. Your mother is exploiting that. Elijah says, My mother doesn't want your money. There it is, Richard says. The line she taught you. Elijah grips the bike handles. What did you already take from her? Richard doesn't answer that. Instead, he takes a small step closer. Do you know what happens if this filing holds up for even 48 hours? Lenders panic. Contracts freeze. People lose jobs. Projects collapse. Families lose homes tonight if it doesn't. Richard's eyes sharpen. So he knows Elijah knows. That bothers him. You think this is about families? Richard says. This is about a woman who waited 2 decades and suddenly decided she wants the world to call her by a name she couldn't keep. Asha goes cold. You should stop talking. But Elijah is watching too closely now. Because when liars get tired, they start telling on themselves. He reaches into his bag and pulls out the silver fountain pen. Richard sees it. And something real flashes across his face for the first time all night. How did you get that? My mother kept what was hers. Give me the pen. No. Richard takes another step. That pen belongs to this family. Elijah's answer is immediate. I know. That one lands. Because now they're not talking about an object. They're talking about inheritance. Memory. Proof. Richard lowers his voice. You have no idea what your mother is inviting into her life. Elijah says, She's lived with it longer than I've been alive. I can bury her in court. There it is. Plain now. No donor smile. No polished language. Just the truth under the suit. I can make this drag for years, Richard says. Depositions, motions, fees, appeals. I can make this so expensive she spends the rest of her life wishing she stayed quiet. If you're standing where Elijah is standing, that line does exactly what it's meant to do. It scares you. Because he sounds practiced. Like this is not a threat he invented tonight. Like this is how he has always won. And for one ugly second, Elijah sees his mother at their kitchen table. The bills. The swollen fingers. The years already gone. What if being right is still not enough? That is the lowest point of the night. Not the laughter. Not the shoving. This. The moment you realize truth and power do not walk into the room with equal weight. Then the gate opens. 3 vehicles. County seal. Sheriff's sedan. Everything stops. A deputy steps out with a folder in hand. Behind him, a county court liaison in a charcoal coat. Richard turns. His face says what his mouth doesn't. Not here, not now. The deputy walks straight up the drive. Mr. Langston? Richard squares his shoulders. Yes, I'm Deputy Carver. I have notice of emergency judicial review and interim preservation order pending 9:30 hearing. He hands over the papers. Richard takes them too slowly. Carver continues anyway. Pending hearing, no transfer, destruction, removal, alteration, or concealment of records related to South Market, the Langston Family Trust, or affiliated covenants may occur. Relevant board members are to remain available. Guests on the terrace are openly filming now. The quartet has stopped. The silence feels expensive. The county liaison steps forward. One more item. Due to the trust property claim, the East Library and Archive Wing are to be sealed pending inventory. Richard actually laughs once. Short, disbelieving. The library is inside my home. She checks the order. That appears to be one of the issues before the court. And that one sentence does more damage than 100 accusations. Because the library is the room. The room Naomi never got back into after Camille died. The room Richard locked down. The room where documents disappeared. The room he has always treated as the center of the house and the proof of his place in it. Now a county officer is telling him it may not be his to control tonight. People start drifting. Not running. Just stepping back the way wealthy people do when scandal starts looking contagious. Then another car comes through the gate. Old blue sedan. Cracked taillight. Coughing engine. Elijah knows it before it stops. His mother. Naomi steps out slowly and closes the door with steady hands. Dark coat. Plain shoes. No jewelry except the chain she always wears under her shirt. Nothing about her arrival is dramatic. No speech. No music. No performance. And somehow that makes it hit even harder. Because this woman has spent 22 years avoiding this driveway. Now she walks through the open gate like fear finally got tired before she did. Elijah starts toward her. Mom, I'm all right. But her eyes are already on Richard. Not angry. Not wild. Just steady. Steady is worse. The guests feel it too. You can almost hear them recalculating the night in their heads. Richard finds his voice first. You shouldn't have come. End quote. Naomi stops a few feet from him. That line worked better when I was 20. A few people glance at each other. Because that tells them plenty all by itself. Richard lowers his voice. This is not the place. Naomi's answer is immediate. You made it the place. No one moves. Even the staff have gone still. Richard glances toward the deputies. Toward the board. Toward the guests. He tries to pull the moment back into private. At least come inside. Naomi shakes her head. No, you did enough behind closed doors. That line moves through the crowd like a current. Because now the story has shape. Not just a filing. Not just a family dispute. A silence. A disappearance. A woman who was told to stay out of sight while someone else wore the house like a birthright. Margaret Sloan comes down the steps holding the petition and the board notice. The board will appear for the hearing, she says. Richard turns. Margaret. And until the court rules, she continues, all South Market closing activity is suspended. You cannot do that without. Without what? Margaret asks. Your permission? That one lands right in front of the donors. You can see it in their faces. For years, Richard has been the room. Tonight, he's just a man in it. Celeste comes down next. She stops near Naomi, but not beside Richard. She looks from one to the other. Then at the papers in Margaret's hand. Then back at Richard. Tell me clearly, she says. Who is she? Richard doesn't answer fast enough. Naomi does. I'm Naomi Camille Langston Bennett, Edward Langston's daughter. That sends a visible ripple through the steps. Some guests look at Richard. Some at Celeste. Some at Elijah. Celeste asks the next question before anyone else can. And the boy? Naomi doesn't look away from Richard. My son, Richard says. This is exactly what she does. She arrives late, makes emotional claims, and hopes no one notices the timing. Naomi turns to him fully. No. What I did for 22 years was stay quiet, while you counted on that quiet like it was proof. That line sticks. Because it's true in a way everyone there can feel. Asha steps in beside Naomi. Mr. Langston has already been served. The court has already entered preservation. If he would like to keep speaking in public, I'm happy to let him. Richard glares at her. This is extortion. Asha smiles without warmth. No. Extortion is when you threaten people with the truth you buried. Deputy Carver clears his throat. We need access to the East Library. Richard doesn't move. For 1 second, nobody breathes. Then Margaret says, Open it. Richard turns on her. You have no authority here. Margaret holds his stare. Tonight neither do you. And right there, in front of the guests, in front of the deputies, in front of the woman and the boy he spent years keeping off the property, Richard Langston reaches into his pocket with a hand that is no longer steady and takes out the library key. That matters. Not because it's a key. Because now everyone sees what he was trying to protect. The hearing starts at 9. 30 inches the West Study because the library is under county seal. Half the gala is gone by then. The other half stays because scandal is the one thing money never stops watching. Board members sit along one side of the room. A county liaison stands by the door. Benton Weiss, Richard's attorney, joins by secure video. Asha has her files open and ready. Naomi sits straight-backed in a chair near the end of the table. Elijah stands behind her at first, unsure if he belongs in a room like this. Then Naomi reaches back without looking and touches his wrist. Stay. So he stays. On the screen, Judge Helen Mercado appears from chambers. No wasted words. No patience for theatrics. This hearing concerns an emergency petition to freeze the South Market transfer and preserve records pending review of alleged concealed trust interests and beneficiary interference. Counsel, proceed. Asha stands first. Your Honor, closing is scheduled for midnight. If the transfer goes through, protected housing rights attached to the underlying covenant will be functionally destroyed before full adjudication. We are not here on a theory. We are here with original documents, sworn declaration, certified records, and a defendant who has had exclusive control over the archive at issue for 22 years. Benton appears on screen in a dark office and says, Your Honor, this is a stale family grievance, dressed up as urgency. The petitioner delayed decades. Naomi speaks for the first time in the hearing. I delayed because I was 20, pregnant, broke, and being threatened by lawyers who knew I couldn't survive a long fight. The room goes very still. Judge Mercado looks at her. Then at Benton. Then back to Asha. Continue. Asha does not waste the opening. We have certified proof that Naomi Camille Langston Bennett is Edward Langston's daughter and named equal beneficiary under an amended trust executed after his marriage to Camille Bennett Langston. We also have a sworn declaration by Leonard Pike stating the amendment was concealed under pressure from Richard Langston. Benton jumps in. A deceased attorney's late-stage declaration is not automatically reliable. Asha lifts a page. Which is why we also submitted handwriting confirmation, archive references, the covenant copy, and notice that the original signing instrument is in the petitioner's possession. She holds up the silver fountain pen. Richard's face tightens again. Judge Mercado notices. "Mr. Langston," she says, "have you reviewed these materials?" Benton starts to answer for him. Richard cuts in. "They are incomplete." Naomi looks at him for the first time since the hearing began. "Then say what's missing." He doesn't. And that silence matters. Because the truth has a sound when someone refuses to say it. Benton tries again. "Your Honor, even if a trust dispute exists, it does not justify freezing a major redevelopment based on a private family disagreement." Asha turns a page. "South Market is not private. The covenant restricts conversion without beneficiary consent because it was designed to protect occupied, affordable housing." The judge looks up. "Occupied?" Asha nods. 312 families. Now the room changes again. Because numbers on a spreadsheet are one thing. Families are another. Benton says, "The covenant referenced here has not been operative in the current development structure." Margaret Sloan speaks from the side of the room. "That may not be accurate." Everybody turns. Richard's eyes narrow. Margaret keeps going. When the preservation team entered the sealed library, Mr. Langston was asked to produce archive keys. A second key was found on his ring. It opened a locked firebox inside the east cabinet. Richard says, "Margaret?" She ignores him. Inside was a duplicate original covenant copy with Edward Langston's seal and a handwritten note attached in Camille Bennett Langston's hand. The room goes silent. Even Benton stops talking. Judge Mercado says, "Do you have it?" The county liaison steps forward with a document sleeve. "Just recovered, Your Honor." Asha takes it carefully, scans the note, and for the first time all night, even she looks shaken. Judge Mercado says, "Read it." Asha lifts the page. The note is short. Very short. That's what makes it hit. "If Richard ever claims South Market as profit against the purpose Edward promised, this copy is to go to Naomi. If I cannot protect it myself, let the paper do what men would not. Camille." No one in the room moves. Not Naomi. Not Elijah. Not Celeste. Not even Richard. Because that line has just reached across 2 decades and put a dead woman back in the room. And suddenly the whole thing is no longer abstract. Not a technical dispute. Not a filing trick. Not a stale grievance. It is a promise. Written by the one person Richard needed erased for his version of history to survive. Judge Mercado breaks the silence. "Mr. Langston, do you dispute the existence of this note?" Richard's voice is lower now. "I dispute its legal effect." The judge doesn't blink. "That is not what I asked." He says nothing. And if you've ever watched a powerful man realize the room no longer belongs to him, you know how quiet that moment can get. Benton recovers first. "Your Honor, even if these materials justify preservation, freezing the closing would cause extraordinary harm." Naomi speaks again, and this time her voice is steady enough to make the words heavier. "Extraordinary harm is when people with children go to sleep in homes you promised were protected and wake up as line items." No one interrupts her. Not because she is loud, because she is finally being heard. Judge Mercado looks through the filings, then at the newly recovered note, then at Richard. "Interim order is granted. The South Market closing is frozen pending evidentiary review. The archive remains sealed. A special master will be appointed by morning. No action may be taken affecting occupancy, records, beneficiary interests, or covenant enforcement without court approval." Benton starts to object. The judge cuts him off. "I'll hear your objections on schedule. Not tonight." Then she looks directly at Richard. "If the court finds document concealment or interference, sanctions will follow. I advise full cooperation." The screen goes dark. Just like that. No music. No speech. No grand finish. Just a ruling. And the strange thing about moments like that is how small they sound compared to how much they change. For a second, the room stays frozen. Then everything starts at once. Phones light up. Messages go out. The county liaison starts inventory instructions. Board members stand. Margaret closes her folder. Celeste slowly removes her engagement ring and sets it on the table in front of Richard. Not slammed. Not theatrical. Just placed there. I asked you who she was, she says. Richard looks at the ring. Then at Celeste. You don't understand what this is. Celeste's face doesn't change. That's the first true thing you've said tonight. She walks out. Richard doesn't stop her. Because he can't. Because there are some losses too immediate even for men like him to spin. Margaret steps toward Naomi. I should have asked harder questions years ago. Naomi looks at her. You knew enough to ask? Margaret doesn't dodge it. I knew enough to know Camille was afraid. I let that become someone else's problem. Naomi nods once. It isn't forgiveness, but it isn't nothing either. Outside, the last of the guests are leaving under a spray of phone screens and low voices. News vans are starting to arrive at the bottom of the hill. A reporter is already speaking into a camera near the gate. The rain has stopped. Everything is wet and shining. Elijah steps out onto the front drive with his mother beside him. For the first time all night, he can breathe fully. Not because it's over. Because it finally started going in the right direction. Richard comes out behind them. Not running. Not shouting. Just moving with the stiff, careful anger of a man who has taken too many hits in one night to hide them all. He looks at Naomi first. Then, Elijah. This isn't over. Naomi turns. No, she says. It's not. Richard's eyes settle on Elijah. You think tonight makes you a Langston? Elijah almost answers. But Naomi gets there first. He was won before you laughed at him. That lands harder than anything else left to say. Because it doesn't argue. It doesn't plead. It doesn't ask permission. It just names the truth. Richard looks at Elijah. At the face he should have recognized sooner. At the name he tried to kill on an envelope, and ended up reading in front of the whole city. At the boy he called the help before realizing the bloodline had just reached back through his own front gate and handed him court papers. And for the first time all night, Richard has no line. No performance. No room left to dominate. Just silence. The kind that finally belongs to someone else. A flash goes off at the gate. Then another. Reporters are arriving now. Cameras lifting. Questions starting. Margaret steps outside and tells the press only one sentence. South Market is frozen pending review of newly surfaced beneficiary records. That's all it takes. Because now the story has escaped the house. Now it belongs to daylight. Now it belongs to every tenant waiting for an answer. Asha walks over with her file case and glances at Elijah's body cam. Don't lose that footage. He gives a tired half smile. Wasn't planning to. She looks at Naomi. He laughed on the record. Threatened on the record. Refused on the record. Touched the papers. Spoke his name. This was a very bad night for him. Naomi lets out the smallest breath. For the first time, Elijah sees the weight of 22 years move a little on her shoulders. Not gone. Just shifted. And sometimes that is what victory looks like at first. Not fireworks. Relief. They start walking toward the gate. Past the valet stand. Past the stone pillars. Past the place where Elijah stood, getting laughed at less than 2 hours earlier. He slows there without meaning to. Naomi notices. You all right? He looks back at the house. At the front steps. At the doorway where Richard stood when he thought the whole night belonged to him. He really thought he could make me feel small enough to disappear. Naomi's answer is quiet. That's how people like him protect theft. First they steal the thing, then they steal your nerve to claim it. Elijah looks at her. You ever think about what would have happened if Pike never left that storage key? Naomi does not answer right away. When she does, her voice is calm. Every day. Then she stops walking, faces the house one last time, and for a second, Elijah thinks she might cry. She doesn't. She just stares at the lit windows, the wet stone, the place that carried her family's name while refusing to open its doors to her. When I was little, she says, my mother told me something about houses. Elijah waits. She said the walls always know who was forced out of them. He follows her eyes to the front of the estate. To the lights. To the open door. To Richard standing there alone now while staff circle around him and no one quite knows where to stand. Naomi gives the faintest nod, like she's finally answering someone from a long time ago. Tonight it remembered. They reach the gate. Reporters start calling out questions. Miss Bennett, did you know about the trust all these years? Is Elijah Langston Bennett your son? Was Richard Langston trying to close the deal before this came out? Asha moves in front of them for a second, buying space. But Naomi doesn't hide. Not anymore. She turns once, just enough for the cameras. My name, she says clearly, is Naomi Camille Langston Bennett. South Market was promised protection. Tonight, that promise gets heard. That's all. No speech. No revenge. Just the name. And if you were one of the guests at that party, if you were one of the people who laughed because a wet delivery boy at a rich man's gate looked easy to laugh at, that is the moment you would remember later. Not the quartet. Not the wine. Not the suits. That moment, the one where the woman they erased said her full name in front of the house that helped erase it. Elijah opens the passenger door of the old blue sedan for her. Naomi stops him. No, you drive. He blinks. What? You brought it home. He looks at the car. Then at her. Then smiles for real. For the first time that night. Small. Tired. Real. He takes the keys. As he rounds the hood, he catches one last look at Richard in the driveway. Still standing there. Still watching. But now the distance between them feels different. Before, it was power. Now it's exposure. Richard Langston laughed when a black delivery boy brought legal papers to his gate. He laughed because he saw wet shoes, cheap fabric, dark skin, and a job he thought made a person easy to dismiss. He laughed because he thought the boy was carrying someone else's problem. Then he read the name on the envelope. And by the end of the night, that same name had frozen his deal, opened his archive, split his board, cost him his fiancée, put cameras at his gate, and dragged the truth back into the light he had spent 22 years controlling. Elijah starts the car. The engine coughs once, then catches. Naomi settles into the passenger seat and closes the door. For a second, neither of them speaks. Then Elijah looks at his mother. You good? She stares out through the windshield at the house, getting smaller behind the rain-specked glass. No, she says honestly. Then she turns to him. But I am done being quiet. I think infirmary. He nods, puts the car in gear, and as they roll down the hill, away from the estate, away from the gate, away from the place where humiliation almost became the whole story, Elijah feels the weight of the night settle into something he'll carry for the rest of his life. Not the laugh, not even the threat, the turn. The moment the door opened the wrong way for the man who thought he owned it, the moment a stolen name came back to the front of the house, the moment a delivery boy stopped delivering shame and started delivering consequence. And the truth is, that's how power usually loses. Not all at once. Not with thunder, with a document, a witness, a name said clearly, a person who stays standing long enough to make the lie look tired. By midnight, South Market is still standing. 312 families still have their lights on. The closing is frozen. The archives are sealed. The story is out. And somewhere behind them, in a house built on silence, Richard Langston is learning what men like him always learn. Too late. You can laugh at the person carrying the truth. You can humiliate them. You can try to buy them, threaten them, bury them, outlast them. But once the right name reaches the right door, at the right time, even a mansion has to answer.